I never thought I would ever scream like that in my life. The kind of scream that rips out of your chest and doesn't even sound human. The kind of scream that makes your throat burn and your ears ring at the same time. But that was exactly what I did when I saw her lying on the cold floor, blood pooling around her head, her chest barely moving like she was fighting for her last breath. I froze, my mind refusing to believe what my eyes were seeing. The pain in my chest was worse than if someone had stabbed me straight through the heart. And in that moment I understood it. I understood the kind of pain you would never wish on anyone, not even your worst enemy. But before I could even process what was happening, something else in the room made my blood run cold. It was there in the corner, something I still don't have the words to explain. I opened my mouth to call for help, but my voice cracked and died in my throat. It started months earlier. That was when everything went that night, when my whole world turned upside down. I wish I could say I saw it coming, that there were warning signs, but honestly, life seemed pretty normal back then. I lived with my mum and little sister Daniela in a small house at the edge of town. Our place wasn't much, but it was home. My mum worked 2 jobs, and Daniela was in her final year of high school. I was in college, commuting back and forth, trying to juggle classes and a part-time job at a grocery store. Our life wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad either. We had our small fights, our laughs, and our little routines that made things feel safe. Every evening, we'd eat dinner together at the rickety wooden table in the kitchen. Mum would ask us about our day, Daniela would complain about school, and I'd joke about the weird customers at work. Simple, normal. But normal has a way of breaking when you least expect it. The first time things felt off was one evening when Daniela came home from school, looking pale. She pushed her food around her plate without eating and barely spoke. Mum noticed right away, of course. "What's wrong, Danny?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, the way only a mother can sound. "Nothing," Daniela muttered, her eyes fixed on her rice. But I could see it in her eyes. Something was wrong, something big. Later that night I went to her room. She was sitting on her bed with her knees pulled up to her chest, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. I sat beside her quietly until she finally whispered, "Have you ever felt like someone's watching you?" "All the time?" Her words made the hair on my arm stand up. "Watching you? Like, at school?" I asked carefully. She nodded, biting her lip. "It started a few weeks ago. At first I thought I was just being paranoid, but now it's every day. I see the same man. Tall, skinny, wearing a black hoodie. He never comes close, but he's always there. Outside the gate, across the street, at the bus stop. Just standing, watching." A chill ran through me. I wanted to laugh it off, tell her it was probably just some random guy, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She wasn't lying. She was terrified. "Did you tell Mom?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "She'll just worry and she's already tired." I promised her I'd keep an eye out, that maybe I could pick her up from school a few times. But deep down I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a creep hanging around. Creeps existed everywhere, right? That was mistake number 1. The next few weeks, things seemed normal again. Daniela didn't mention the man. And I got caught up in my own routine, school, work, friends, but then little things started happening around our house. At first it was small, a sound at night, like footsteps outside the window. Our trash can knocked over, mail missing from the box. Mom thought it was just raccoons or kids fooling around, but Daniela looked more and more withdrawn. Then one morning she screamed. I rushed to the front porch and saw why. On the steps was a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside were dead flowers, not dried flowers, dead, crushed, wilted, smelling of rot. Mom wanted to call the police, but what could she even say? Someone left us flowers. They'd laugh us out of the station, so we threw them away. That was mistake number 2. The following nights got worse. We'd hear tapping on the windows at odd hours, scratches on the door, like someone was dragging a nail across it. Our dog Max would bark furiously at nothing, growling into the dark corners of the house as if he could see something we couldn't. I tried to act tough, telling Daniela it was probably just some prank. But the truth? I was scared too. One night I stayed up late studying. Around 2 a.m. I heard it again, the tapping. This time it was louder, more deliberate. Tap, tap, tap like knuckles rapping against glass. My heart pounded as I crept toward the living room window. The curtains swayed slightly from the breeze of the fan. I pulled them back, and there he was. A man in a black hoodie, his face hidden in shadow, standing inches away from me on the other side of the glass. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared. I stumbled back so hard I knocked over the lamp. By the time Mom rushed in asking what happened, the man was gone. I wanted to call the police right then, but when I explained, Mom just frowned. It's probably just some teenager messing around. We can't jump to conclusions. But Daniela's face told me everything. She knew it was him. After that, the fear never left us. We slept with the lights on, double-checked the locks, and kept Max inside at night. But nothing could prepare us for what happened next. It was a rainy Friday evening. Daniela had stayed late at school for a group project. Mum was working her second shift, so I drove to pick her up. When she got into the car, she was shaking. He was there, she whispered. At the gate. Just standing, watching. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. If I see him, I swear. But I didn't finish the sentence. Because at that exact moment, as we turned onto our street, Daniela gasped. There was someone standing in our driveway. The rain blurred my vision, but I could see enough. The black hoodie, the tall, thin frame. He stood perfectly still, like he had been waiting for us. Max barked wildly from inside the house, his deep growls echoing through the rain. I slammed the brakes, my heart racing. Stay in the car, I told Daniela. But before I could even move, the figure turned and disappeared into the trees beside our house. I wanted to chase him, but fear rooted me in place. We rushed inside, locked every door and window, and sat in silence listening to the storm. That was the longest night of my life. But it wasn't the worst. Not yet. The worst came the following week. The night I screamed louder than I ever thought possible. The night I saw Daniela on the floor, her blood spilling fast, her life hanging by a thread. And in that corner, in that cursed corner of the room, was something I still can't explain. And that was only the beginning. I don't know how long I stood there frozen, my eyes darting between Daniela on the floor and that shadowy figure in the corner. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't still either. It was like the dark itself had bent and twisted into something human-shaped. Too tall for the room, too thin for bones to hold. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs, I thought it would break through. I wanted to scream for Mom, but she wasn't home. home. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to listen. The only sound was Daniela's weak gasps for air and Max's frantic barking, claws scraping the tile as he tried to get to her. And then, just like that, it was gone. The corner emptied, as though nothing had ever been there at all. The weight in the air lifted, but the blood on the floor, that was still very real. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands against Daniela's head wound, my fingers shaking and slippery with red. Stay with me, Danny, please. Don't you dare leave me! My voice cracked, but her eyes rolled back, her chest rising only in shallow jerks. Max whined beside me, nudging her arm with his nose. My shaking fingers fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with hands so slick with blood that I nearly dropped it. The ambulance came fast. Too fast for me to even process what I told the operator. My sister, she's bleeding. I don't know what happened. Please hurry. By the time the paramedics stormed in, Daniela was unconscious. They worked quickly, lifting her onto a stretcher, their voices sharp and urgent. One of them asked me what happened, but the words stuck in my throat. What was I supposed to say? That some shadow thing had been standing in our living room? They rushed her to the hospital, sirens screaming through the night. I rode with them, my hands still stained red, my mind replaying the moment over and over. How did she even get hurt? Did she fall? Did someone break in? And why did I seek that? Mom arrived at the hospital an hour later, her face pale and her uniform still on from work. When she saw me, she grabbed my shoulders hard enough to hurt. Where's Danny? What happened? They don't know yet, I stammered. She just collapsed. There was blood and I stopped myself. I couldn't tell her about the thing I saw, not yet. The doctors said Daniela had a deep gash on her head, like she'd been struck with something blunt. They managed to stabilize her, but she was in a coma. Hearing that word nearly knocked me to the floor. Coma, a word that felt like a cage, like being trapped in a nightmare you can't wake up from. Mom cried into her hands. I sat beside her in silence, staring at the floor, my mind spinning. I couldn't shake the image of that figure in the corner. But that night was only the beginning. The days after the hospital visit dragged on like years. Daniela lay unmoving in her bed, machines beeping steadily beside her. Mom barely left her side, her face hollow from crying. I tried to keep things together, taking care of the house, feeding Max, even going to class sometimes, but the silence inside me was growing louder. I couldn't forget the man in the hoodie, or the box of dead flowers, or the tapping on the glass. I started digging through Daniela's phone while she slept in that hospital bed. It felt wrong, like I was violating her privacy, but I needed answers. I went through her texts, her call logs, her photos, and that's when I found something that made my stomach twist. A folder in her gallery hidden deep inside. Pictures, dozens of them, taken from outside our house, from across the street, from the school gate. All of them blurry, like they were snapped quickly. Some were of me. Most were of her. I dropped the phone. Whoever had been following Daniela wasn't just watching. He'd been collecting us. Keeping proof. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. Max growled low in his throat, pacing near the door. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, the tap, 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 this time on the hospital window where Daniela was staying. I shot up from the chair I'd been dozing in. The blinds were half drawn, but I could see a shape on the other side of the glass. My stomach dropped. I yanked the blinds open. The window was empty, but pressed against the glass was a fresh handprint. Long, thin fingers, too long. My scream echoed through the sterile halls, waking nurses and sending Mom running. They told me I was exhausted, hallucinating, that I needed rest. But I knew what I saw. Someone or something was still watching. A week passed. Daniela didn't wake up. Mom was falling apart, and I was barely holding it together. But one night, when I came home to grab clean clothes, I found something waiting for me on our front porch. Another box. This time inside wasn't flowers. It was a photo. A photo of me sitting in the hospital, asleep in the chair beside Daniela's bed. The blood drained from my face. He had been there, inside, watching us. I backed away from the porch, my hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped the picture. Max barked furiously, his hackles raised. I locked every door, every window, and sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in my hand, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The silence stretched on until morning. When Mom called me to come back to the hospital, Daniela's condition had changed. I raced there, my chest tight with dread. When I walked into her room, I saw her hand twitch. Just once, like a small spasm. Mom gasped, grabbing her daughter's fingers. She moved. Did you see that? The doctors came in, checking her vitals, whispering to each other. I should have felt relief, hope, something good. But instead, my stomach turned cold. Because as Daniela's fingers twitched again, I noticed something. Her lips moved. Just a fraction. Like she was trying to form words. I leaned close, my ear almost against her mouth. And what I heard made my skin crawl. He's here. When those words left Daniela's lips, my blood turned to ice. She wasn't supposed to be able to talk. She wasn't even awake. Her eyes stayed closed, her body still hooked to machines, but her lips had moved. And the whisper was so faint. I almost believed I had imagined it until... Mom squeezed my arm. She said something. Mom gasped, her eyes wide. I heard it too. The doctors brushed it off as muscle reflex. Some involuntary action caused by her brain activity. They told us not to get our hopes up, but I wasn't thinking about hope. I was thinking about what she said. He's here. That night, I couldn't stop pacing the hospital corridor. My mind raced in circles. Did she mean the man in the hoodie? Was he in the hospital right now? Was he watching us even closer than before? I went back to her room around midnight, after Mom had finally dozed off in the chair beside her. I sat there in the silence, staring at Daniela's face. And then, without warning, her lips twitched again. I leaned in so close I could feel her breath. This time, the whisper was clearer. He's inside. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. Mom jolted awake. What happened? Nothing, I lied quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't tell her, not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whoever was tormenting us wasn't just outside anymore. He had gotten in. The next day, I skipped class and went back home. I needed answers. I tore through Daniela's room, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. That was when I found her journal tucked under her mattress. The last entries made my hands shake as I read them. March 2nd, he was outside the gate again today. He never talks, just stares. Why me? March 10th, I told my friend about him, but she laughed. She doesn't understand how scared I am. March 15th, he followed me home. I ran so fast I thought my lungs would burst. When I looked back, he was gone. But I know he's still out there. March 20th, he knocked on my window last night. 3 times. When I looked, no one was there. March 21st, I don't think he's human. The last sentence made my stomach drop. I read it again and again until the words blurred. I wanted to throw the book away to pretend I hadn't seen it, but something inside me knew she was right. This wasn't just some creep. Something darker was at play. That evening, when Mum finally went home to shower, I stayed behind at the hospital. I sat by Daniela's bed, clutching her journal in my hands, whispering to her even though she couldn't hear me. I'm gonna fix this, Danny. I don't care what it takes. But as I sat there, the machines around her beeped strangely. Not faster, not slower, just off, out of rhythm, like a heartbeat being forced into a different pattern. Then without warning, every light in the room flickered, once, twice, and the window. The tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. I spun around, my chest tightening. There was nothing there, just the blinds swaying slightly. But when I stepped closer, I saw something that nearly made me faint. Another handprint. This one was smeared downward, like someone had dragged their fingers across the glass. I wanted to scream for the nurses, but I couldn't. My throat had locked up. And then Daniela's voice, this time loud enough for the machines to pick up. Behind you. I whipped around so fast I nearly tripped over the IV stand. The room looked empty. Empty except for the long shadow stretched across the floor. Darker than it should have been under the dim hospital lights. I blinked and it was gone. The doctors said it was impossible. They insisted Daniela's coma made it impossible for her to speak. But I knew what I heard. Mum looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I could see it in her eyes too. She was scared. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Stress, lack of sleep. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the more I tried to push the thought away, the worse it got. Every night I stayed at the hospital, the tapping came back. Every night the shadows seemed to stretch too far. And every night, Daniela whispered warnings through cracked lips. By the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront whatever this was. I stayed awake with a flashlight and Daniela's journal clutched in my lap. The clock ticked past midnight. Mom snored softly in her chair. Max, who I had sneaked into the hospital despite the rules, lay curled at my feet, his ears twitching. And then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. This time not on the window. On the door. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hands. Max growled low, his fur bristling. The tapping turned to scratching. Slow, deliberate. Like nails dragging across wood. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to do something. Call for help. Wake Mom, anything, but my body was frozen in terror. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then the door handle rattled. I jumped up, pointing the flashlight at it. The silver knob shook violently, like someone was trying to force their way in. Max barked furiously, teeth bared. Who's there? I shouted, my voice breaking. No answer, just the sound of the metal rattling harder. Louder, until I thought it would snap off. Then silence again. I waited, the flashlight beam fixed on the door. Seconds dragged like hours, and then slowly the handle began to turn. The silver handle turned slowly, creaking as if someone on the other side was testing how much resistance it would take to push it open. My throat went dry. The flashlight shaking so hard in my hands that the beam wobbled across the walls. Max barked, lunging at the door, his nails clicking against the tile. Mom, I shouted, but she didn't stir. She was sunk deep into exhausted sleep, her head slumped against the chair. The handle jerked again, harder this time. I backed up toward Daniela's bed, my heart pounding so violently I thought I would collapse. Stay away! I shouted, though my voice cracked like a terrified child. And then, silence. The handle stopped moving. The scratching ceased. The air grew so heavy, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. Finally, with trembling legs, I crept toward the door and yanked it open. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no shadows, nothing but the faint hum of fluorescent lights. But when I looked down, I saw them. Handprints. Long, smeared, oily handprints streaked across the white door. The fingers too thin, too stretched. Not normal. I slammed the door shut again, locking it tight. When I turned back, Daniela's eyes were open. For the first time in weeks, her lids weren't closed in heavy stillness. Her gaze darted around the room, wild and terrified. Mum stirred awake just in time to see it and cried out, rushing to her side. She's awake. Oh God, she's awake. The doctors came rushing in, swarming her with questions, shining lights into her eyes, checking her vitals. Daniela tried to speak, but her voice cracked like dry paper. Her lips trembled, her throat working hard to form a sound. When she finally managed words, her voice was raspy, broken, but clear. He's not done. Everyone froze. The doctors exchanged uneasy glances, brushing it off as post-coma confusion. But I knew she wasn't confused. She was warning us. That night, when Mum finally left the Cole family and Daniela had drifted into restless sleep, I sat beside her, clutching her journal again. Danny, I whispered, you have to tell me. Who is he? What is he? Her eyes flickered open, glassy and tired. She turned her head slowly toward me. You shouldn't have looked, she whispered. Her words punched the air from my lungs. Looked at what? She coughed, her voice breaking. He feeds when you see him. The more you notice, the closer he gets. That's why I stopped talking about him. That's why I tried to ignore him. Tears leaked down her cheeks. But now he's here and he won't leave until the lights in the room snapped off. We were plunged into darkness. The machines beeped erratically, their sounds distorted, warped, like someone was pressing their fingers against the wires. I fumbled for my phone flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I felt it. The presence, heavy, suffocating, filling the room with cold, so sharp it cut into my skin. Max barked furiously at the corner, the same cursed corner where I had first seen it. My hands shook as I raised the weak glow of my phone, and there it was, the shadow, taller than the ceiling, its head bent at an unnatural angle, its fingers dragging along the wall like claws. The black hoodie stretched tight across its frame, but its face, its face was just empty. A hollow void where features should have been. Daniela screamed, a raw, agonized sound that made my chest ache. She clutched my arm with surprising strength for someone so weak. He's chosen you now, she rasped. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The shadow stretched closer, its long fingers reaching out, the air vibrating with a low hum that rattled the glass in the windows. I shouted for help, but the sound died in my throat. My vision blurred, the edges of the room folding in on themselves, like I was being pulled into a tunnel. Then hands grabbed me. Real hands. Human hands. The lights flickered back on. Nurses flooded into the room. Mum behind them shouting, what happened? The shadow was gone, but the handprints remained, black smeared across the walls, the floor, even Daniela's bed rail. The doctors tried to explain it away. Power outage, stress, shared delusion. But I knew. We both knew. Daniela lay back against her pillows, tears streaking her face. She looked at me, her voice breaking. You asked me once what the pain is, that I would never wish on anyone, she whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. She closed her eyes, trembling. It's knowing he'll never stop, that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, he'll keep coming. And the worst part, she opened her eyes again, staring at me with a look that hollowed me out inside. Now you see him too.